Well, I want to welcome everyone to the Deepening Relationships webinar. My name is Lars Peterson, and this webinar is brought to you by EFR, Employee and Family Resources. I want to note that at the end of our presentation today, there will be time for a few questions or some questions, and just use the raise the hand function. And then at the end, we'll make sure we answer as many as possible. What I'd like to do before we actually start with the presentation itself is give you just a kind of a brief overview of my background and experience. I think that'll help make the examples that I give provide some context and make more sense out of those. I've worked with EFR for a while now, doing presentations like this, webinars and in person before COVID, and also counseling clients for EFR. I have a private practice, a psychotherapy practice in West Des Moines, and I see both individuals and couples. I've done that for about 5 years. Before that, and I still do some family business consulting and also mediation. So in one form or another, I've been working with people and their relationships for quite a while. As I was thinking about today's presentation, it really occurred to me how important relationships are to my clients. It's really rare that I work with a client and some of their key relationships don't come up in our work together. I would say that happens less than 10% of the time. So having good relationships and then deepening and strengthening those relationships can be really important to people's well-being. And I see that over and over again. Along those lines, I'm going to be sharing some client examples today, just to make it easier for you to connect with your own story and what's going on with you. Obviously, the names will all be changed. I'll probably use Joe and Jane for everyone. The details will even be changed, so that you wouldn't be able to recognize these people. But again, I do think it's helpful. So with that, we'll just jump right into today's objectives. And part of the objective is to gain increased awareness of the relationship stressors that COVID is contributing to, but also the opportunities. Definitely gain practical approaches, strategies, and techniques to deepen your most important relationships. So I want this to be practical, and that ties in with the last bullet. I'm going to ask you questions on which to reflect throughout the presentation today. And today's presentation will be about 25 to 30 minutes before we take some questions. So I encourage you right now, if you have pen and paper handy, or can open a Word document or somehow be able to take some notes as we go. What I don't want to have happen is 6 months from now, you're thinking back and it's like, wow, there was a presentation on relationships, and geez, was his name Sven or Oli, or what was his name again? And just not be able to take away something from this presentation that you can actually use. That's really the focus. This will apply to partners, to teens, to household members, and several of the slides will apply specifically to either partners or teens. So COVID-19 stressors. I think everyone knows these stressors, and they impact people to varying degrees. One of my clients jokingly said to me that he's practiced social distancing way before social distancing was a thing. And I've had several clients actually say that. But for many of us, it's a big stressor. Concern about getting sick, self or family, financial and work stress. See that with quite a few of my clients. One client who was laid off in the hospitality industry, has some health conditions, then is coming back again to the hospitality industry, and how's that all work? Boredom and lack of routine and structure, the Groundhog Day thing, those kind of go together. And that would probably be the thing I hear most about from my clients. Negative and conflicting news, and then of course relationship stress, close quarters. People are spending a lot of time with household members right now, for better or for worse. So along those lines, relationships are tested. There's a difference in need for space, and the person who needs more alone time suddenly doesn't have it. So in my own household, my wife really values togetherness and blocks of time, but she also is an introvert and really likes her alone time. So we've had to craft some ways, to separate our offices and kind of block time to make that a little bit easier for her. And the next slide after this is kind of a humorous lyric that addresses this. High levels of stress that come with COVID can bring out the worst in us and make us edgier, easier to get angry. And we'll talk more about that in an upcoming slide. And working at home, new routine, new challenges. So alcohol consumption is up, domestic violence is up. Alcohol consumption is a little tricky because people aren't going out to buy alcohol now, but there's something different about people drinking heavily at home. And I definitely have several clients that would fit that. So the first reflection, I'll ask you to take just a moment for yourself to reflect on, where do I fit on the scale of needing more alone time versus wanting more togetherness with household members? So take just a second to reflect on that. So Dan Hicks song, I'm not going to sing this. I'm the person who the music teacher said, asked me to mouth the words when I was in elementary school. So I'm definitely not going to sing this, but how can I miss you when you won't go away? I keep telling you day after day, but you won't listen. You always stay and stay. How can I miss you when you won't go away? So in a humorous way, that addresses this piece about the togetherness, too much togetherness for some. Excuse me. So a lot of truth in these lyrics for many of us right now, especially if our relationships aren't as healthy as we'd like. So let's talk about really kind of how we're wired, and this will be pretty brief, but it's I think helpful background about how we're wired to navigate the world. One of the systems we have in our body is the system that detects and responds to threat. So for example, if you're driving, even if you're very analytical, maybe you're up in your head a lot. If someone swerves into your lane, even if you're analytical, you're not going to say, I wonder if they're texting. Well, no, it's 8 o'clock, 8 in the morning. Maybe they're eating. No, maybe they're crash. Okay. So that threat detection system is automatically going to kick in. You're going to have a reaction. You can have cortisol and adrenaline coursing through your body, and you're going to take action. So in relationships or just in life, many of us tend to go either into fight. So let's address this. Let's put this to rest. Let's, whatever. Or flight. And it can be literally flight, or it can just be kind of shutting down and getting away from whatever's going on, avoiding the conflict. Oftentimes in the couples that I work with, one tends to go toward fight, one tends to go toward flight. I've had a number of clients, couples who one would want to resolve it and they keep advancing. The other would want to need some time to process and they retreat. And the more the person advances, the more the person retreats, and it gets into a real unhealthy cycle. So along with this threat system used to be all about saber-toothed tigers and, not going out of the cave when you hear a loud noise too quickly, because it could be a saber-toothed tiger. Nowadays, a lot of the threats, as we saw with the stressors of COVID, are what if this happens? Or what if this other thing happens? What about my job and finances and getting sick? And also that sense of threat can come about when we ruminate, like, oh, why did I do that? Or I shouldn't have done this. So one of the amazing things about us as humans is we can think and imagine and plan and design technology that lets us meet together today, like we're doing right now. That same brain, though, can ruminate, can what if, overthink, as a lot of my clients like to say. So that can put us into that fight, flight, or freeze. And that can be really hard on relationships when we're in there. So take a moment to reflect on your key relationships. Do you tend to go into fight? Do you want to resolve it? You to keep advancing? Or do you tend to go into flight and you tend to want to retreat and kind of gather your wits about you? Or do you freeze? Hard to really discuss things. And when we're in fight or flight, by the way, it is hard for us to discuss things. And we'll talk more about this in this next slide. So this model is called the window of tolerance. In the middle is calm and alert. Those are the key words. So we may have some anxiety, we may feel a little numb, but more or less we can think, we can feel, we can reason. Anytime we get out of that window, it makes us hard, it makes our worldview very narrow. So for example, when that car swerves in front of us, we're not thinking about this blue sky and how beautiful it is out. We're very, very narrow. Same thing with the relationship. When we feel threatened in the relationship, or we feel defensive or attacked, our world gets very, very small. We get very hyper-focused on that threat. So sometimes we go into hypo. That would be numb, disconnect, shut down. Hyper would be anxiety, anger, overwhelm. My experience is we'll do almost anything to stay in that window of tolerance. That means avoiding conflict. That means using substances. But we'll do almost anything because it doesn't feel good to be either in hyper, too much, or hypo, not enough. So a key point with this, and I guess for this slide, if you don't remember anything else about this slide, is our stress level in relationships, at home, with COVID. It's a little bit like a beaker of water, okay? And if that beaker is only half full, we can add a whole bunch more water before it overfills. So if our stress level is about, half of where we go into hyper or hypo, a lot of things can happen. Somebody can say something critical, this can happen, that can happen. It takes a while. If we're already feeling a lot of stress, that's like that beaker of water that's 3 drops away from overfilling. It takes very little for then us to go into this sense of wanting to fight or flee, or maybe freezing. So we're wired to connect. This threat, by the way, can be physical or emotional. And this wired to connect means that we are wired to connect with other beings. So when we go into either hyper or hypoarousal, when we're feeling a lot of emotion or shut down and disconnected, we can do some things to help us get back in that window of calm and alert. Some of those are personal things like mindfulness, exercise, deep breathing, just reassuring self-talk, hey, I got this. But also through other people we trust and are supportive. I was just on with telehealth this morning with a woman who talked about her husband, how she can just be whoever she is with him. She can be silly, she can be playful, she can be sad, she can be, no matter how she is, it's okay. So he is able to really help her regulate her emotions and stay in that window of tolerance. In her case, family members, family of origin members, aren't quite so safe. So she's built a bit of a wall up with those family members and doesn't trust them to the same level. So that's the piece about wired to connect. Other people can help us soothe and feel better, or other people can trigger some of those really hard feelings, some of those difficult emotions. So we're going to talk now about good enough relationships, because today's presentation and the subsequent slides are going to really address how we deepen and strengthen our relationships. But we have to assume, first of all, that it's a good enough relationship. And by that, what I mean is that you can communicate relatively well about day-to-day things, things that need to be done. Maybe if you have kids, things going on with the kids, who's going to go here and who's going to go here. You can communicate pretty well on those non-emotional issues. At least a lot of times they're non-emotional. They sure can be. Also, you're able to you may not resolve conflict or may not even discuss it, but it doesn't get out of hand. You don't have screaming matches. The other piece of this, the four horsemen is actually from John and Julie Gottman, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, okay? And what they found in their research, and they've been doing research, John Gottman, for over 40 years. Julie Gottman, his wife, has been counseling couples for over 40 years. And so they found out that in 90% of the time in their research, if there's a lot of criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, in other words, no, like I'm not letting you in, or contempt, which is probably the worst of these four, if that's at play in a big way, that couple, unless something is done, is heading for separation. So if your relationship fits more into the four horsemen are present, you can't communicate well, even on a day-to-day basis, conflict gets out of hand, that's when I'd urge you to contact EFR to see if there's a way to address those issues and get the relationship back on track. And then from there, you can strengthen and deepen the relationship. So that's the good enough relationship. Pretty much from now on, we'll be talking about deepening relationships. Along with deepening, I think strengthening is definitely a part of that. Deepening really means just going deeper, not just skimming above the surface. And we'll see some ways to do that soon. So the first bullet, make it safe to talk. Or I mean, the overall bullet is making it safe to talk. That's critical, making it emotionally safe to talk. Just like the woman I talked to you about this morning, she didn't feel emotionally safe to talk about a lot of things, actually, with her family members, family of origin. Whereas with her husband, she felt very safe to talk about just about anything. Making it safe, one thing you can do is establish mutual purpose. So, for example, you know, XYZ associated with COVID is hard for both of us, and yet we both want whatever you want, okay? Letting the other person know that, hey, we're going the same way. We're going the same direction. We may be talking about it in a different way, but we both want the same thing. I just was working with a couple this week, and the woman actually said, you know what? No, actually, the male actually said, you know what? I think we're talking about really the same thing. We both want the same thing. We're just saying it differently. So that was really a good way for him to get them back to mutual purpose. Contrasting. So both of these, mutual purpose and contrasting, are from a book and a whole set of trainings from Crucial Conversations. I highly recommend the book and/or any of the training sessions if you can find those. And it's really how to hold conversations when the stakes are high, family relationships, relationships with household members. So stakes are high, opinions vary, you don't think the same thing, and emotions are strong. So contrasting is about, for example, a contrast statement might be, this isn't about your skill as a parent. I think you're a great parent. It's about what I notice when you get really stressed. So it's kind of like, it's not about this thing that you might really get triggered by. It's just about this piece. Gentle Startup is again from John and Julie Gottman, and they do a whole series of training for therapists, and they actually have some books for people to deepen their relationships as well. Gentle Startup just means you're starting up gently. You're not saying, you did this. It's not the blame or finger pointing. For example, when I walk into the kitchen and see all the dishes still in the sink, I feel unimportant, or I feel like I feel sad, I feel disappointed, would probably be a more likely one. It could depend really on the context of the relationship. There could be all kinds of feelings. I would really like it if after you eat, you do the dishes. You know, that might be with a teenager. Much different than, oh, again, I can't believe it. Would you just do your dishes? So another way to say that is, you know, when you may, a couple I'm working with, this would apply to them. You know, I feel hurt and sad about the way you and our son talk to each other and resolve things without involving me. I'd really appreciate it when there's something significant. You would come and get me rather than making decisions just you and our son. So that might be another way to start up more gently. The whole key isn't how you say it. I could say it 10 different ways right now and it would be fine. It's just to avoid the blame and criticism. It's hard to go deeper. It's hard to, it's hard to go deeper if it doesn't feel safe. So the 80-20 rule. This is something I use a lot with clients. I'll just go over this quickly, because really what it means is a few things are really, really important. Most things aren't that important. I'm working with a client right now who's building a house. I have actually several clients building houses right now, which is interesting. Building a house with his girlfriend, and over and over and over, he would come in and say, you know, this is bothering me, and she wants this, and I can't believe this, and what about this? You know, I'm a year from now, I'm going to move in, I'm not going to like this. And so one of the things we've worked together to do is really decide, okay, what are the key things that are really, really important to you, and what can you let go of? And in his case, he found out he could let go of a lot. So just really getting clear in our relationships, what's really important and what do I need to just kind of let go of? Maybe there's something really important to my partner, my teenager, not that important to me. Let's let that one go. In crucial conversations, this is called key behaviors. What are the key behaviors? And that would be something like gentle startup, because conversations that start poorly, over 90% of the time, according to Gottman's, end poorly. That'd be a 20. So a reflection question for you right now. When I look back on this time of uncertainty and change, what do I want to be able to say about my role as a parent or a partner, son, sibling, daughter, whatever that is? What do I want to be able to say about my role? What kind of a partner I was? What kind of a parent I was, whatever that is. So mindfulness. My working definition of mindfulness is pretty simple: paying attention in the present moment, whatever's happening right now, with curiosity and openness. And yes, it's really good for stress reduction and greater enjoyment of the present moment. EFR has other seminars that go into more depth into mindfulness and stress reduction and some of those things. But also, it's a really good thing just being aware of right now, what I'm feeling, what's going on right now, what's going on with my partner right now. I can see they're getting activated, or I notice I'm starting to get red and flushed. Watching for signs that you're becoming activated so you can step back and be more skillful. Again, in crucial conversations, they call that learning to look. So teenagers, listening's your superpower. These are some kind of interesting questions. And so if listening's your superpower, judgment undoes everything that listening as your superpower does. So really being curious without judgment and asking questions like, how would you describe my personality? That could be a very interesting question for many of us. What's one thing adults don't get about teenagers? Another really interesting question. One of the things I learned early on, 2014, after I just received my license to do therapy, I worked at an agency and worked with a lot of preteens and teenagers. And those of you who have teenagers know this. Driving, shooting baskets, playing a game, anything where your teenager doesn't feel like you're focusing on them can create a good atmosphere to ask some of these questions. And obviously it's not meant to be an inquisition. It's just a very curious attitude. Like, what are some of the first things you remember? With your partners, listening is still your superpower. Judgment still undoes it. So there was a study a while back. Arthur Aaron asked people 36 questions to discover if, and these questions went from not very vulnerable to very vulnerable in terms of the progression. and wanted to see if mutual vulnerability fosters closeness. And that's that curiosity, non-judgmental piece. The study's authors, one key pattern with the development of a close relationship, a deeper relationship among peers, that could be partners, is sustained, escalating, reciprocal, personal self-disclosure. So we'll just kind of jump ahead to some of those questions. So one of the early ones in those 36 questions, given the choice of anyone in the world, whom would you want as a dinner guest? The telephone call question is an interesting one. What would constitute a perfect day for you? And in Gottman's work, they call this a love map. Do you know a lot about your partner? Could you answer these questions on your own? And that's actually part of the assessment that I ask people to do sometimes as a Gottman trained therapist, is to see how much they know about their partner. Alternately, sharing something you consider a positive both ways. And as you can see, more vulnerable would be, what are some of your most troubling memories, and then treasured memories. So maybe you know a lot of these about your partner, maybe you don't. Another way to go deeper is to use 8 dates, which is a book that the Gottmans put together. And these 8, and I have personal experience of this book with my wife, and also then have recommended to clients. But there's, in these 8 dates, you address topics like money and work, intimacy, connection, just a variety of kind of really topics they've identified as critical to strengthening and deepening the relationship. The title's pretty good, Essential Conversations for a Lifetime of Love. Each chapter has a presentation, so they have material, and then also questions for you to ask, even questionnaires sometimes. So I highly recommend this book. So a question for yourself, again, self-reflection question. What are the opportunities within my current relationships to strengthen and deepen them? How can I take these relationships to a new level? With curiosity, asking good questions, being a good listener, and probably really, if something's bothering me, getting that out in a way with a gentle startup, not letting that fester, not having resentments build. So self-care, one of our last slides. You know what, if we're overly stressed, tired, burnout, if that container of water is almost full and it only takes a couple drops for it to fill over, if that water is our stress, we're not going to be our best in relationships. So not only some reflection about where am I? Am I just about to the top, ready to flow over, or am I down a ways so I can really be pretty resilient? But the question is, what activities or practices that ground and soothe me? For many, again, it can be partners, could be teenagers even, could be other household members, and it could be pets. One of the favorite things for me about doing telehealth is seeing my clients' pets in the house. Especially fun one is to see the 90-pound Labrador try to get up in my client's lap while we're having a session, thinks it's a lap dog. So typically the camera's going this way and that way, and it takes him a minute or two to kind of collect himself. But sometimes pets can be very soothing and can be very good self-care. So filling in the blanks, in this webinar, my key takeaways are: based on today's webinar, I will to start doing the above, I need to, whatever that is. A little bit about EAP benefits that all of you and your families receive. 24-hour phone support. This has in-person counseling sessions. They're also doing utilizing telehealth, so you don't have to leave your house. Again, this is no cost to all employees and household members. And you can see there's some things that maybe you hadn't realized in terms of financial consultation, legal consultation, elder care, child care resources, even identity theft. One of my clients today, actually, someone got his debit card numbers. So life coaching. So a lot of benefits through the EAP, through EFR. And with that, I will take a few questions.
Thank you, Lars. We will just kind of wait a minute or two for people to submit their questions. I did receive one that I wanted to address with everyone. A question that comes up almost every time. Will we be receiving a recording of the presentation? And the answer is no, we don't send these out directly to our attendees. However, within about 24 hours of the webinar, we put these on our website, www.efr.org/webinars. And so that is where you can see our library of webinars from the past 8 weeks or so. And for people who do want to answer or ask Lars a question, there's a function called raise your hand. And if you just type in your question, I will be able to ask Lars and he can share his knowledge. I have a question, Lars, while we're kind of waiting. What is one of the more common issues you've seen pop up, just especially in the last 8 weeks, due to people being either very isolated or in too close of contact with their loved ones? What is kind of a common theme you've been seeing?
The two most common themes would be just around trying to get routine and structure within the household. And that really does tie into the second one, which is too much togetherness. So even in couples that have very good relationships, sometimes there's just too much togetherness. So those tie in both pretty closely to each other.
Yeah. All right, we have a question. It says, a lot of the things my partner and I would do for fun right now are not possible. Do you have ideas for things we can be doing together? I feel like we are living our lives together, but separately.
Wow, that's a good one. So the kind of the caveat with my answers to these questions is, without knowing more about your situation, it may be hard to address it, spot on, but I don't know if you like to be outside. I don't know if you like physical activities, but for many people right now, one of the things that I'm a avid biker, and I just found out that bike shops throughout the country are selling out of bikes. Biking has become even more popular. So social distancing by going out on bike rides, hikes, anything in nature can be really restoring and fun. There are a lot of concerts now that are being offered. And you can find them online, Facebook and other places, Facebook Live, and other places. So there's concerts, there's virtual tours if you and your partner like to, like museums or like art galleries, zoos. There's a number of resources along those lines. So just being creative, it is a hard time to find those things.
Thank you. The next question is, the idea of whether a relationship is good enough to make better or more meaningful. Any thoughts on how to assess these things, especially in close quarters when maybe both people are not on the same page?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd kind of go back to the slide. If there's a lot of conflict, a lot of criticism and defensiveness, if there's contempt, any contempt at all, stonewalling, if it's hard to talk about day-to-day things, then I would say that would be the time to get help. And again, I do couples counseling, telehealth, EFR does, a lot. That's just how it's being done right now with a lot of couples. So you can get that, you can get help with that. But those would be the main things. If you don't have that kind of base level of feeling relatively comfortable, you can talk about most things. There's not a lot of criticism and defensiveness. Of course, there's some, but it's not just this pervasive feeling of tension in the house, then you can strengthen and deepen versus try to rebuild or, you know, address some of the problems.
Right. Lots of questions coming in. So this one is saying, we have experienced the opposite in that isolation has deepened our relationship. So I think the first person said it's kind of drawing them apart. So this person says, you know, we've experienced the opposite. This has actually deepened our relationship. Any advice for how to not fall into the autopilot trap once normalcy comes back into play?
Wow. Yeah. That takes some thought. So not knowing your situation, I would say probably the best advice would be to set up structure so that it doesn't happen. Maybe purchase the 8 Dates book or something else. Maybe structure in date nights or structure in activities that you've been doing at home. Make it a part of your structure going forward so that even though you don't have to do it because of COVID, you're not in quarantine, you still have this structure and this time allotted to make sure it happens. So make it easy. It'd be like if you were trying to eat healthy and all the vegetables were in the basement and all the brownies were upstairs. Well, it'd be hard to eat healthy. So anything you can do to make it easier to carry on the habits that you've created when you've deepened your relationship.
Thank you. What are some starter questions to ask a teenager how they feel about going to college during the pandemic?
Wow. I mean, that's a good one. Yeah. Right there. How do you feel about going to college in the pandemic? What's this like for you and your friends right now? So maybe even take a little bit of a focus off that person and bring their friends into it. Is there anything that's exciting about this, and you know, just really the questions aren't as important as the spirit of curiosity. Like, what's this like for you right now? Yeah. Is there anything good about it? Is it all scary? Is it, you know, what's this like for you right now?
Thank you. I'm going to read 2 questions because they're pretty similar. Yet they're different enough that I want to include both of them. However, I feel like you can maybe respond to both of these at the same time. One person says, my extended family and I have different views on how to protect ourselves. We have kids with high risk. How should I address this issue with them? I don't want to damage the relationships with them. And then another person said, how do you respond to other non-immediate family members that we frequently travel and spend time with that may feel that they can begin going back to normal life, but my family isn't yet ready? It's putting a serious strain on our relationships.
Wow, those are great questions, and they do tie together. Kind of hearkening back to that make it safe slide. It doesn't sound like it's something you can ignore or that you should ignore. It sounds like something that needs to be addressed. So it seems like there's a lot of mutual purpose in all of this. Like, we all want to keep our family members safe, so mutual purpose. And so this isn't about that, contrasting. I'm wondering how we can talk about this, or how we can work through this. What are your thoughts? Making it safe, being inviting, doing anything you can to phrase this in a way that you're not provoking defensiveness. Now, that doesn't mean that the other person won't get defensive, and some people have really strong opinions about this, but just presenting the facts and being curious, like, this is how I see it, and, you know, based on A, B, and C, I'm really curious, how do you see it? Tell me more about how you see this, because we do see this very differently. So I would recommend Crucial Conversations as a guide for that, and how to make these conversations safe. There's also a chapter in Crucial Conversations called State My Path, which is a really concise and good way to just directly, but not confrontationally, state how you see things.
Thanks, Lars. Can you speak a little bit more about good enough relationships? That was the question. I don't know if there's more.
Well, so it's, just for this presentation, we only had so much time. Obviously, probably any of these slides could have been a 3-hour presentation or more, but so that was to kind of make it, just give us a model. But actually, relationships are probably on a continuum, right? From highly conflictual, really toxic, to very satisfying, very fulfilling, very safe. And there's some kind of a continuum. I don't know where that breaking point is, but I do know that if this relationship's causing you a lot of distress, then you may need help, or you may need at least some kind of resources to address whatever is causing that much stress. On the other hand, you can always try some of these strategies to deepen and strengthen your relationship and see how it goes. And if obviously you get stuck and you keep running into a wall as you try to strengthen or deepen the relationship, that tells you you've got some foundational things.
Thank you. Is the 36 questions available anywhere?
Yes, just Google 36 questions, or Google New York Times 36 questions. They had an article on the 36 questions in the study. There's actually an essay that was done by a woman who used these 36 questions with a person from one of her college classes that she didn't know very well, but they just decided to do this as an experiment. And a very interesting essay about how they actually fell in love. And she's not attributing it only to the 36 questions, but so yeah, if you put in 36 questions, I'm guessing that's plenty to bring up all kinds of resources, including the 36 questions.
Thank you. This person says that they work at home. They make calls to people all day who generally want to talk about stress. And at the end of the day, I just want to relax, not talk, but my spouse wants to talk. What would be a good way to have that conversation?
I mean, I think the person already pretty much set it up. This is why I feel the way I do. I have this stressful job, and I just want this alone time at the end of the day. I think they've already set it up. And you know what? And maybe contrasting. So this isn't about you. Obviously, I want to spend time with you. I really treasure that time together. But I'm just kind of worn out at the end of the day. Maybe we can talk together about a way to make this work for both of us.
Thank you. And then we have a question that says, you spoke of a book when discussing the how to hold conversations. What is the name?
That would be Crucial Conversations.
Okay, Crucial Conversations. All right, well, that is it. Lots of great questions. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. Really appreciate your attentiveness, and we're out of time. So Lars, thank you so much for contributing to another webinar with EFR. As I said, we do place these on our website within about 24 hours, so please look there. Next week we have a webinar, and it's at 10 a.m. and the topic is let me just check. Managing difficult conversations. So that will be an interesting one. So I hope you can join us. Lars, is there anything else you'd like to cover before I sign everyone off?
No, I just appreciate the invitation to do this.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks.